So you were talking about the business,
Yeah.
The industry. Tell us a little bit. Walk us through the Bahamian business side of the music industry.
The way it should be, or the way it's been, and how we're trying to change it.
Both.
Today, well, over the years and up to today, what usually happens is, especially a new and upcoming artist, well, let's go back to yesterday. An artist would go in the studio and record an album, release an album, and have no copyright information on the sleeve, got no type of protection for themselves, and they would just, and people would be happy hearing themselves on the radio. And to a large extent, that happens with a lot of younger, newer artists as well. Now, having said that, as I said a little while ago, young people are exposed to so much information. I mean, there's a wealth of information out there on the internet. So a lot of people who are serious about the business side read up on it before they get involved. Now, mind you, many of them, even though they read, there's something that caused them to go wild when they hear themselves on the radio, and that quote-unquote fame starts to get to their head, and they forget a lot about the business side because they're seeing themselves in the newspaper or seeing themselves on TV or whatever. But for the most part, we're still very, very, very young in terms of the development of the industry in this country. But I must tell you, where we are today, we're a great deal, much further than we were 20, 30 years ago, I can assure you.
Okay, so step one you mentioned was you go into the studio, you record.
Actually, no, step one, you actually write on paper.
Oh, write on paper,
Right.
okay, because you hear people talk about freestyling in the booth. That's the new age.
But see, generation gap we were talking about.
So you create your music,
Right.
producer produces or
Right.
composes.
Right.
Then you write, then you record. Are there mixing and mastering facilities locally available?
Yes, in fact, there's a proliferation of home studios where so much good music is being produced in people's bedrooms. It's just incredible. It's just incredible. Back in the 70s, we only had Criteria, and then in the mid to late 70s, there was not Criteria, Elite. So I'm getting mixed up with Miami. There was only Elite Studios, and then there was Compass Point in the mid to late 70s. But today, so many young people have studios at home with the software, using their Apple computers, and they're mixing, and a lot of people are actually mastering now at home as well. But let's get back to the business point. You're talking about that. You're in the studio. You've written a song. Somebody who's there in the session with you, man, change this word right here. Why don't you add this line, or why don't you do that, right? Yeah, man, that sounds good. The record gets released. The record becomes a smash hit. Now, when it becomes hit and they realize they got to register it or whatever, or they should have registered it, but man, would you tell me only wait 10% of the song? No, wait, that's the main part of the song. I need more. That's worth at least 40% of the song. These are the type of things you should really be doing before you actually get to the recording stage. So at the end of the day, there's no argument. And that has happened quite a bit. I actually saw a documentary online with the Ohio Players, where they had some serious, not Ohio Players, Ray Parker Jr.
Oh, yes.
Ray Parker Jr. lost, I forgot which song it was, but it's one of his biggest compositions that the record company stole from him and never gave him the credit for it. And of course, he just left it alone because he had so many other hits after that. But, people, when you're in the creativity groove, when you're in the studio, a lot of people don't think about the business side, okay? But that's where a lot of disputes originate. Mm-hmm. And by the time a song starts playing and gets big, that's when the disputes really, get really out of control. But, having said that, there's hope, because like I said, there are a lot of young musicians today, and they're very much aware as to what's going on. And many of them call me and ask questions to help clarify certain issues for them. So, like I said, my generation and those older than me, we weren't so aware of these particular aspects of the business, but the new generation, they are, and I think as we progress more and more, it'll be less and less of a problem.
Okay, so everyone's sitting in the studio, you
Right.
finished creating the song,
Right.
Everybody decides what the splits are going to be.
Right.
A lot of people are pulling out their iPad now and have their PDF split sheet, and everybody decides what it is, and you email it out to everybody, so everybody keeps a copy.
Right.
In an ideal sense.
In an ideal sense.
Okay. So then ideally, now we've decided the song is ready. We've all agreed it's been mixed and mastered with the final vocal. Do we copyright it in the Bahamian registrar, or is it best for us to go to the Library of Congress in the U.S.?
Let's put it like this. From a technical standpoint, registration in the Bahamas is registration in the wider world. It's registration to all of the countries that were signatories to the Berne Convention. Okay? So theoretically, doing it in the Bahamas is perfect. Okay? Now, unfortunately, because we're still relatively very young in the intellectual property registration, and some people in the offices might not fully appreciate how important it is to get these things done. And I've heard some horror stories from some clients who come and tell me that their stuff is sat there for years and years, and they've got the receipt where they took it there, and somebody else came up with the same thing. And so like I said, theoretically, if you register in the Bahamas, you're protected. But what a lot of people have been telling me that they're doing, they prefer to go and do it at the Library of Congress, because they feel as if they have a more secure method of protection.
And okay, through the U.S. Library of Congress, they have the online capability.
Right.
But that is only an SR. That's not a PA. And a lot of times when you do it digitally, there's no forum for you to actually upload your song.
That's right.
So once I go online and I log in and I register my song, am I really protected because I didn't email in my audio file?
It's amazing that you say that, because a lot of clients, they come and ask these technical questions, and the first thing I say to them, I said, let me tell you something. Before you go through any of that fancy online stuff, the old-fashioned method still works. I said, you take your song, if you got it on a cassette or on a CD, or you just got a lyric sheet or music paper with your notes and everything written out, you take that, you put it in an envelope, and you mail it back to yourself, and you keep that.
So still the poor man's copyright.
And they said, well, Mr. Pindling, how does that work? I heard people say that, but how does that work? I said, what people don't understand is the legal significance. Okay? In any dispute, I don't care what type of legal dispute you have, you can only win a dispute if you have evidence. If you wrote a song, and I decided I wanted to copy your song, and the court will say, all right, Miss Sands, when did you write the song? And you're lying, so you're going to say 8th of November 2012. And I know Mr. Pindling didn't write that song before me. I then dig out my old dusty envelope, and you know what the evidence is? The postmark from the post office. Indisputable evidence.
Okay.
And I tell I say, I don't care what modern method of registration you use, always still use the poor man method, because you never know when you might need it. So the same illustration you just raised with regard to uploading and everything, whatever deficiencies that may create for you, you still have your backup with the old-fashioned method.
And that's a very good point you made, because there was a case recently with Kanye West and Tyga and all these rappers who were all disputing this beat with Drake, and everyone was involved in it because the beat had been emailed all over the industry. And it came down to the Pro Tools session. And they were able to prove so far, in what I've read, that the Pro Tools session of this one particular producer had the original creation date further back than everybody else's Pro Tools session, because they were sending the session all around.
And I'm sure the computer would probably have some registration as to when the session started.
Right.
Exactly.
So even from a poor man's copyright, you also, as a composer, the producer, you also want to keep a copy of your masters.
Exactly.
Which people are always upset, oh, my hard drive crashed, I don't have this session anymore. So the masters that people used to fight over in Ray Charles days and all of that still becomes...
That's right.
A factor,
and
so
if,
that hasn't changed.
And if you put the little C in the circle and your signature and your name and print and the date, there's nobody that can dispute that.
Okay, so then the next part of it, how do I want to get paid for my work? Nielsen BDS sound scan process. There are 22 radio stations here locally, some of which allegedly pay and some of which don't for your spins. Do Bahamian Is the way Bahamians promote their music, is that something that they reach out and get their songs encrypted and get their songs registered with Sound Exchange and Harry Fox and Nielsen?
Now, I don't know if there are artists out there who get their music encrypted, but I can tell you that there's a much larger percentage of composers and artists now who actually register their songs with PRS, for sure. And very many of the stations also pay their royalties to PRS. And I know quite a number of composers who actually collect their royalties from PRS. However, one of the greater deficiencies that we have in our copyright law is only composers have the right to register.
Okay, composer, meaning
The
producer
writer.
of the music
Not the,
or
no,
the
not
lyric?
the producer,
the
just the
lyrical,
writer, the composer of the lyrics. Okay, the performer, the singer, the producer, the session musicians, the background vocalists. None of these people have a copyright. We're in the process at this as we speak, trying to get our Copyright Act upgraded and amended so that these neighboring rights can be included. So I'm sure you heard very recently one of our top female entertainers, Therese Hepburn, passed away a couple of weeks ago. All of those hit records that Therese had, she's got no copyright, she's got no intellectual property right in any of them.
So the way it is, PRS would have only been cutting a check to the person who wrote the lyrics.
Right.
So even though you logged into PRS and you put lyrics by so-and-so, music by so-and-so, and you listed all that information, the only people who actually receive a check.
Composers.
Okay. So how does that affect you if you're BMI or ASCAP and you are having your music played here?
Well, again, BMI, ASCAP are the administrators in the United States. PRS is the administrator for the Commonwealth, the British Commonwealth countries. They all have relation agreements where they protect each other in each other's jurisdiction. So, for example, in fact, I'm an attorney, so I got to be careful what I say. I'm actually, at the moment, chairman of the Bahamas Copyright Tribunal. There's a major dispute going on right now, okay, with regard to a certain media house here in the Bahamas with regard to their content and not paying for their content. Okay? Now, you've got video content and you've got audio content. Okay? I've got PRS on one side claiming and a major US entity claiming, and they're making the same claim against the same fund, and there's a major overlap between their claims. Okay? Because if a movie has got soundtrack, okay, the movie house negotiates all the copyright deals and the licensing deals with the composers before they release. Okay, so you got the soundtrack playing in the movie. Okay, are you gonna claim again because the movie house is playing your song even though you've already been taken care of? And if you claim, who are you claiming against? So you got these competing claims and what I call this gross overlap in the pool, okay, of royalties. So it's getting pretty deep and it's getting very exciting though. It's getting, and we're in the process of trying to clarify a lot of these deep ocean blue water issues, as I call them.
Okay, so you got 22 radio stations right now to date. People who have licenses who have gone through all the steps to get approved. Is there a mandate on them to ensure that they are paying to PRS or paying on the music that they're spinning? PRS
PRS is supposed to police them. Okay, and for the most part, from the information that I have, that's okay. Where we have a major problem is the nightclubs.
Okay, because they don't purchase the public license.
If I'm having a party at my house, or if I'm having a big cookout out on Goodman's Bay or on Long Wharf, and I got DJs out there playing all of this protected music, nobody's getting licenses because nobody's aware that they should get licenses. And when you tell them they need a license, they want to argue because they don't understand why. Which, again, there's a move afoot by some of the other clients of mine where we're actually in the process of getting that sorted out. Because, for example, in Trinidad, you've got the Copyright Organization of Trinidad and Tobago, COT. In Barbados, you've got COSCAP. In Jamaica, you've got Jamz. Okay? We're in the process right now in the Bahamas of getting a Bahamian licensing authority set up so these people can actually and it's different to PRS, mind you. It's different because, but again, it's all about education and sensitizing the public, because you can't play my music without, outside of your domestic environment, without my permission, especially if you're making money from it.
And that's interesting because, as you say that, you know, I've walked into a venue in Atlanta, and you see they have the sticker on the door that says that they are an ASCAP or BMI or CSAC paying facility.
Exactly.
So when you go to perform there, you know that they are paying a fee.
Exactly.
And then the downside as a small business owner is you're like, got to charge a higher premium for people to use your venue, because when you have your concert here, I have to pay a royalty on what you're going to perform. So it's the small, you know, with this being a small country, can small businesses who play music afford to have a license to be able to play that music legally?
Of course they can. The same way they got to spend money to buy the liquor is the same way they got to spend the money for the license for the music that they're going to play. If a certain brand is too expensive, then you don't buy it.
So then what happens? Do you then get into a catch-22 where the well-known artists who are licensing their music, you've heard, you know, the sip that they feel they're banned or they're blackballed, or you listen to a radio station and they never play my music because they know they have to pay royalties because I register. Then
here, or you mean in the US?
Here, you know, they have. I've heard entertainers complain that they feel certain radio stations don't play them because they know their music is registered. That's how they feel. I don't know if it's proven.
You got to talk to me off camera, because I've never heard of that. Now, I heard of complaints of their music not being played, but not because it's registered.
Just because they don't like them?
But that's another story. But I don't know. I've never heard.
Okay, that was.
I don't hear everything. I mean, let's get it, you know, straight. I'm not saying that I hear everything, but I've never heard that complaint that it's not being played because the radio stations actually know that it's protected and registered. I've never heard that.
So, I want to thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This has been informative. This is part 1 of a very long conversation.
Well, maybe y'all will add me in part 22 whenever you get there.
Definitely.
It's been my pleasure, though. Thank you very much for asking me.
My pleasure as well. DIRadiocast.com, documentary on the evolution of Bahamian music in the digital era. PJ Douglas Sands signing off.
Mad fella, meet woman in club. I say, what you say? In the bush, bring 'em in the bush, bring 'em in the bush, ain't got no name.